Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you today in prayer. I'd like you to raise your hand if you've ever been to the Western Wall. Oh, amazing. Okay, you can put your hand down. So I guess you all know what it's like. Approaching the wall, touching stones that were hewn and stacked one after another with such incredible intention before the Common Era even. It allows us to connect with a relic of the past that it turns out is still extremely relevant to us today. It is not simply that the Kotel is old. Standing in front of the Western Wall is not the same as standing in front of the Parthenon or even the pyramids in Egypt. When we feel the smooth stone of the Kotel on our fingertips, we are transported, glimpsing the kings of our history, the culmination of our wanderings in the desert, and the crowning achievement that generations of our people strove toward, to have a centralized place, their own home as one people, where they could foster an ever-deepening relationship with each other and with God. Touching our foreheads to the stone, we discover that we ourselves are woven into the fabric of the Jewish story, and that we stand in that sacred place and time, and somehow are more able to access the divine. When we look up, we see notes that have been firmly pressed into the wall by hands just like ours, with sincerity and hope, the deepest and purest wishes of our siblings yearning for a future different from their current reality. But a part of being at the Kotel is also being swept up in the joy that our tradition continues on. That almost every single person is able to stand in the plaza and witness its grandeur. And that every Jew can experience the spiritual transcendence of stepping into a different time and the majesty of being close to God. VaYikra, both this week's portion and arguably the entire book of Leviticus, is about just this, attempting, aspiring to be close to God. This is seen perhaps most significantly in the Torah's use of two words that in fact you already know. The first is the word for sacrifice, korban, which has the root of kuf resh bet, literally meaning to draw near, to come close. We're glad that you're coming close right now. And if we want to be very specific about it, the word korban does not really mean sacrifice, but offering. It is not just that we are sacrificing something to be in relationship with God, or with anyone else for that matter. It is that when we come to a relationship that we care about, we want to give our full selves freely. We want to connect, to offer ourselves authentically, and to be loved for each of the parts that are uniquely ours. The second word is one that begins with a relationship the second word is one that begins such a relationship. And it is the first word of our parsha, VaYikra, and God called. As Cantor Kleinman taught us, in the beginning of our parsha, this word signifies that God did not just happen upon Moses, and Moses certainly did not just happen upon God. The word VaYikra signals a high level of intention. Rashi, our favorite 11th century French commentator, writes that we are used to the Torah using words like Vayomer, and God spoke, or Vayitzav, and God commanded, Vayidaber, and God said to Moses. But this VaYikra, and God called, Rashi writes, is the language of chiba, of deep and unabiding affection. It is the language that a person uses when speaking to a child or a spouse. It's the language that we use when calling a dear friend or mentor. VaYikra is the language of care. It is a word that beckons us to come near. It elicits a response from us, not because we feel obligated, but because we feel drawn in, because we're moved, because we cannot help but hear the call and then call back. This is the feeling that a Jew experiences at the Kotel, too. VaYikra, a call from another world beyond ourselves, yet to which we are intrinsically connected. A call that stirs us, that moves us to karov, to come close, to call back, to lift up our own voice and pray. It's a call that makes us realize that we actually have something to say. But the right of any Jew to experience these things at the Kotel is currently under threat. On February 26th, less than a month ago, a bill known as the Kotel Bill passed its preliminary reading in the Israeli Knesset subcommittee. On the surface, this bill actually does not sound challenging. The bill dictates that the Rabbanut, the Orthodox religious authority responsible for overseeing Jewish communal life, including marriage, divorce, kashrut certification, and holy sites under Israeli law, would have control over the entire Western Wall and the plaza that surrounds it. You might say, well, when I go to the Western Wall, we already pray with a mechitza, a barrier between women and men. What more would change? Well, this bill would ensure the closure of Robinson's Arch, an egalitarian prayer space to the right of the Kotel, where non-Orthodox as well as Orthodox women's smachot are celebrated with the fullness of joy. It would enforce a more rigid dress code for those wishing to enter not only a place of prayer around the Kotel, but the entire plaza itself. And it would prohibit women from singing in the entire plaza and Kotel area. According to the bill, failure to comply will constitute in a criminal offense punishable by up to 7 years in prison. Some of you might ask, Rabbi, why would you choose to criticize Israel while the country is at war? And this is actually a good question. And this is not about criticism. This is about the future of all of our people to experience the majesty of the last remaining wall of the Holy Temple, to touch those stones, to be transported back, to believe that future generations will have the opportunity to pray there as well, to call out to God, to draw near to God, to realize that you have a voice inside of you. What I think about as I contemplate the very real possibility of the implementation of this Kotel bill are the number of B'nai Mitzvah students who I will not be able to bring to Robinson's Arch to celebrate their B'nai Mitzvah, be it because they are girls or be it because a boy celebrating his Bar Mitzvah wants to celebrate alongside his mom, his sisters, his grandmothers. I think about the number of Birthright students, Birthright or Israel trip participants, who will arrive at the plaza in the heat of summer, perhaps not wearing full coverage clothing, as they are wont to do. That's a long sleeve shirt and a long skirt, by the way, and will be refused entry. I think about the teen tours that often gather for Havdalah in the plaza, in which young people of all genders lift up their voices in song, not only to take in the holiness of the space, but to experience the beauty of yearning for the next Shabbat, who may be escorted out in the middle of their melody. I think about what it is like to read Torah as a woman in front of the kotel, something that I was lucky enough to do several times alongside Jewish women of all denominations as a part of Women of the Wall, and having our voices drowned out by derogatory Hebrew language, a language that should never be used for derogatory means. I think of the chayalim, the soldiers, who were previously sworn in at the Western Wall, who will no longer have that privilege of inheriting a sacred duty of protecting the citizens of Israel as well as the Jewish people of the world in front of the space that has occupied our minds and thoughts as Am Yisrael for generations. If this bill passes, it will continue to push the more progressive and liberal Jewish community further away from the state of Israel. This bill is a threat to reform, conservative, Masorti, and even Orthodox movements in both Israel and the diaspora. It will be the wedge for those who are liberal-minded. It will mean that those women of the wall will likely be sentenced to prison. It will mean that religious women's services will be prohibited. Most of all, this bill will infringe upon the ability of all Jews to access God at the kotel, to hear God's call and to draw near. Jewish adults, Jewish children, all Jewish people deserve to have these opportunities. This experience cannot be given to only a few of the most observant among us. On Tuesday, under the cloak of war, the kotel bill advanced once again and will be soon brought to the Knesset floor for a final vote. If it should pass, Prime Minister Netanyahu will be the only guardrail of protection. I encourage you, as people who have a stake in what happens in the land of Israel, after Shabbat, to reach out to your World Zionist Congress representative or any Israeli politician with whom you're connected. Talking about this bill in this way is not criticizing Israel or even the Israeli government. It is rather about protecting the future of all Jews to pray in a way that is authentic, that allows them closeness to the divine, and that enables them to hear the call and even return it. When I lead services on Saturday mornings at Torah study, we always say the Ashrei, one of the Psalms. And I think about King David sitting in the temple writing this psalm. He was one of the mightiest kings that Israel had. He was a person who could have closed off the entire temple to only a few people that he deemed the most pious. But instead, he wrote my favorite line in the book of Psalms that occurs in the Ashrei, and that holds two of our words in this parsha. Karov Adonai l'chol korav. Adonai comes near to all who call. L'chol asher yikra'u ve'emet. All who call out with sincerity. Shabbat shalom.